She showed no resistance when they put the restraints on her at the firing range. No badge, no explanation needed, just a calm woman hitting impossible targets who declined to identify herself. The small-town courtroom was set for a regular hearing until large doors swung open. A naval admiral in full dress uniform walked silently down the middle aisle. Military veterans stood to attention. The judge's face lost color as she read the sealed papers, and suddenly, everything changed. Dawn broke over a distant civilian shooting range in coastal Maine. Fog clung to targets as shooters began to arrive. Among them was a woman in her mid-30s, unremarkable in every visible way. She wore faded trousers, a plain gray jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low. Nothing about her drew attention as she walked quietly to the furthest lane, carrying a long case that could hold anything from a specialized camera to music equipment. Marcus Thorne, the range safety officer, sipped his morning coffee and watched through the glass of his small booth. 22 years in the Navy, followed by a decade running this range, had given him an eye for people. Most shooters he could categorize immediately. Hunters calibrating rifles for the season, competitive shooters with their specialized gear, weekend warriors playing tactical games, and the occasional law enforcement officer getting some practice in. This woman was different. She set up at the farthest lane, carefully assembling her rifle with practiced movements that suggested years of experience. Marcus watched from his booth as she began her session. Her first shots hit the center with uncanny precision. Then, without adjusting her scope, she switched to targets at increasingly impossible distances. Marcus noticed her breathing technique, the controlled 4-count inhale, the steady hold, the relaxed exhale as she pulled the trigger. Most telling was how she adjusted for wind without equipment, sensing changes that even seasoned hunters would miss. A nervous patron approached Marcus. "That woman at the end. Something's not right. She's hitting targets that shouldn't be possible with that setup, and she's got no ID badge." 20 minutes later, 2 local police officers arrived. They approached cautiously, hands near holsters. "Ma'am, we need to see some identification and your permit for that weapon," the senior officer said. The woman turned calmly, hands visible. "Is there a problem, officer?" "ID and permit, please." Her face betrayed nothing as she replied, "I don't have those with me." A search revealed no wallet, no phone, just a key card with no identifying marks and a small notebook with what appeared to be coordinates. "You're going to need to come with us, ma'am." She did not resist when they put her in handcuffs. No protest, no explanation, just quiet compliance that somehow unnerved the officers more than resistance would have. As they escorted her to the police cruiser, Marcus noticed something striking. Her eyes continuously scanned the tree line, the road, the mountain range in the distance, as if she were calculating something only she could see. The sheriff's office in Coastal Harbor was small. 3 holding cells, a booking area, and offices for the sheriff and 2 detectives. The woman sat silently during processing, offering no resistance to fingerprinting but providing no information. "Name?" asked the booking officer. Silence. "Address?" Nothing. "You understand refusing to identify yourself is a crime, right?" She met his gaze with calm, steady eyes but said nothing. Detective Elias Vance took over, attempting various interrogation techniques. Friendly conversation, implied threats about federal charges, mentions of cooperation benefits. She responded with respectful silence to each approach. "Got ourselves a real mystery woman," joked a deputy. "Maybe she's a Russian spy." Others laughed. When left alone in her cell, subtle changes appeared in her demeanor. She examined the room with measured precision, noting camera positions, identifying blind spots, timing guard rotations. Through her cell window, she carefully studied the building layout, marking emergency exits and security protocols. "Prints came back empty," Vance told the sheriff. "Nothing in local or state databases. Try federal." "Systems down," Tech said. "We can try again tomorrow." A rookie officer brought her water. As she accepted the cup, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a small, distinctive scar on her wrist, the kind of mark left by specialized training exercises involving rope descents from helicopters. "That's an interesting scar," the officer commented. "Rock climbing accident," she replied, her first words in hours. The public defender arrived late afternoon, harried, overworked, annoyed. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be," he told her after 20 minutes of getting nowhere. "They're talking about terrorist threats now. The weapon you had isn't registered anywhere." As they prepared her for arraignment the next morning, Vance noticed something odd. Despite facing serious charges, despite the orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, she carried herself with unshakable calm, not the defiance of a career criminal or the fear of someone in trouble, but the patience of someone who knew something everyone else didn't. As deputies escorted her to the courthouse van, she briefly glanced toward the harbor, where a naval vessel could be seen in the distance. For just a moment, the smallest change crossed her expression. The coastal harbor courthouse dated back to 1887. Its wooden benches and ornate railings spoke to a simpler time. Today, it was packed beyond capacity. Curious locals, reporters from Portland papers, and, unusually, several men in dark suits positioned strategically around the room. Judge Victoria Harmon looked irritated as she reviewed the docket. At the defendant's table, the woman sat quietly next to her frustrated public defender. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a continuance," the defender said. "My client has been uncooperative, and I haven't been able to prepare adequately." From the gallery, a man in a suit stood. "Your Honor, I'm Special Agent Davies from Homeland Security. We're requesting immediate transfer of the defendant to federal custody, pending investigation of potential threats to national security." Before the judge could respond, another voice joined in. "The FBI has jurisdiction here, Your Honor." A different suited man approached. "We have reason to believe this relates to an ongoing investigation." The judge banged her gavel. "Enough. This is still my courtroom. We will proceed with arraignment, and then I will consider jurisdictional arguments." The clerk read charges: possession of unregistered firearms, refusal to identify to law enforcement, potential terrorist activity. The defendant remained impassive, eyes focused forward, posture perfect. Detective Vance, seated in the front row, studied her with growing curiosity. Something about her didn't fit any profile he knew. Not terrorist, not criminal, not mentally ill. "How does the defendant plead?" Judge Harmon asked. Before the public defender could answer, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Every head turned as a naval admiral in full dress uniform walked in, medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Two officers flanked him, equally formal in their appearance. The gallery fell silent. Without announcement or permission, the admiral walked directly down the center aisle. Military veterans throughout the room instinctively stood at attention. Even the judge straightened her posture. The admiral approached the bench and handed a sealed document to the bailiff, who delivered it to Judge Harmon. As she broke the seal and read, her expression shifted from annoyance to surprise to grave understanding. After a long moment, she looked up. "In light of this documentation from the Department of Defense, all charges against the defendant are dismissed effective immediately. This case is classified as a matter of national security." She banged her gavel with finality. "Court is adjourned." The room erupted in confused murmurs as the admiral approached the defendant. The bailiff quickly removed her handcuffs. For the first time, the woman spoke clearly, her voice carrying authority despite its softness. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience." The admiral's response silenced the room. "On the contrary, Commander," he said, "the Navy apologizes to you." At the word "Commander," every military person present, including two bailiffs, several observers, and even Agent Davies, snapped to perfect attention in obvious respect. Detective Vance watched in amazement as the woman's entire demeanor transformed. No longer attempting to be invisible, she stood tall, shoulders squared, the deliberate military bearing now unmistakable. Without the intentional posture of ordinariness, she suddenly commanded the room just as powerfully as the admiral. Judge Harmon herself, a former JAG officer, now stood and offered a respectful nod to both the admiral and the woman. "Thank you for your understanding, Your Honor," the admiral said. "Commander Evans has been operating under classified orders. The situation required discretion. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for information as the woman, now changed into civilian clothes provided by the Navy officers, stood beside the Admiral near a black government SUV. Sheriff Peterson approached them, confusion and respect battling on his face. "Admiral, with all due respect, my department deserves some explanation. We've been treating this as a potential terrorist threat." "Sheriff, I understand your concern," the Admiral replied. "Commander Evans is one of our most decorated special operators. The details of her assignment remain classified, but I can assure you she poses no threat to your community." "Quite the opposite." Detective Vance stepped forward. "Commander, I owe you an apology." She met his eyes directly now, no longer hiding behind careful blankness. "No apology necessary, Detective. You were doing your job." An elderly man in a veteran's cap approached cautiously. "Excuse me, ma'am. I was a corpsman with the Marines in Desert Storm. Been sitting in that courthouse all morning. I knew there was something familiar about the way you carried yourself." He extended his hand. "Thank you for your service. Whatever it is you do." The woman shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for yours." The Admiral checked his watch. "Commander Evans, we should proceed. Operation Silent Harbor requires debriefing, and Washington is waiting for your report." Sheriff Peterson's eyes widened. "Silent Harbor?" "The counterterrorism operation that prevented the port attack last year." The Admiral remained professionally vague. "Commander Evans has given 12 years of exemplary service to this country. Much of it will never be known to the public." A reporter pushed forward. "Commander, will you make a statement?" "No comment," she replied firmly. "And I'd appreciate privacy." As they moved toward the waiting vehicle, something remarkable happened. The law enforcement officers present, including those who had arrested and detained her, formed an impromptu honor corridor. The military personnel among them saluted as she passed. Detective Vance watched, finally understanding what had seemed so odd about her from the beginning. She wasn't trying to hide guilt. She was trained to hide excellence. Sunset cast long shadows across the now empty shooting range. Marcus, the range safety officer, checked the last lanes before closing. A government vehicle pulled up, and Commander Evans stepped out. Her demeanor was subtly different now. Without needing to hide her capabilities, she moved with the fluid efficiency of someone at the absolute peak of physical training. "I've come for my equipment," she explained. Marcus nodded. "Sheriff had it sent back this afternoon. Special courier." He retrieved a secured case from the office. As she checked the contents, Marcus cleared his throat. 20 years Navy myself, submarines. Nothing fancy like what you must do. But I thought there was something about you." She smiled slightly. "Most people see what they expect to see. That rifle, it's not standard issue for anyone I know." "No," she agreed. "It's not." She took it out, assembled it with practiced ease, and approached the farthest lane. Without a scope, she took aim at a target barely visible in the fading light, an impossible shot by any standard. The rifle barely made a sound. Through binoculars, Marcus confirmed a perfect bullseye. She disassembled the rifle and packed it carefully. "I appreciate your discretion earlier. You could have intervened before the police arrived." "Wasn't my place," Marcus said. "But I did call someone after they took you in. Old Navy buddy who works at the Pentagon now." She paused, then nodded with understanding. "Thank you. Will you come back?" he asked as she returned to her vehicle. Commander Evans looked out toward the harbor, where naval operations continued unseen by most civilians. "Some of us are always around," she said quietly. "You just don't see us." As she drove away, Marcus rendered a perfect salute to the disappearing taillights. 2 weeks later, Detective Vance sat at his desk, reviewing case files, when his phone rang. "Detective Vance," he answered. "Detective, this is Admiral Harrison. We met briefly during the incident with Commander Evans." Vance sat up straighter. "Yes, sir. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling to extend an invitation. Commander Evans is receiving a commendation tomorrow at Naval Station Norfolk. Given your involvement in the situation, She thought you might want to attend. Vance was surprised. I'd be honored, sir. But I'm confused. I arrested her. Sometimes the people who challenge us most end up teaching us the most valuable lessons, the Admiral said. The ceremony is classified, but we can arrange clearance. The next morning, Vance drove to Norfolk, passing through multiple security checkpoints before being escorted to a small auditorium. The audience consisted of fewer than 50 people, mostly high-ranking officers and personnel in civilian clothing who carried themselves with unmistakable military bearing. Vance took a seat in the back row. The ceremony began without fanfare, no press, no photographers. Admiral Harrison approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, today we recognize Commander Lena Evans for extraordinary service during Operation Silent Harbor. For security reasons, I can only say that Commander Evans spent 11 months undercover identifying and neutralizing a critical threat to our national security. Vance watched as Commander Evans stepped forward in her formal Navy uniform, adorned with ribbons and commendations. She bore little resemblance to the unremarkable woman he arrested at the shooting range. The Admiral continued, Commander Evans established herself as one of our foremost experts in counterterrorism and unconventional warfare. After graduating first in her class at Coronado, she became one of the first female operators to qualify for the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, though this fact remains classified. Vance leaned forward, beginning to understand the magnitude of the person he had handcuffed and processed as a potential threat. During Operation Silent Harbor, Commander Evans eliminated 16 confirmed threats while maintaining deep cover. Her actions directly prevented a coordinated attack on 3 eastern seaboard ports that would have resulted in catastrophic loss of life. The Admiral looked directly at Commander Evans. When your position was potentially compromised, you maintained operational security despite personal risk, even when doing so resulted in your detention by local authorities. Vance felt a flush of embarrassment, but he noticed Commander Evans nodding respectfully toward him. There was no anger or resentment in her expression. After the ceremony, Vance approached her cautiously. Commander Evans, congratulations on your commendation. Thank you for coming, Detective, she said, extending her hand. I want to apologize again for what happened. No need. You were doing exactly what you should have done given the information you had, she replied. In fact, your thoroughness was impressive. Most would have been satisfied with a simple warning about range regulations. Vance shifted uncomfortably. If you don't mind me asking, why was it necessary to be detained? Surely you could have identified yourself to us privately. Commander Evans glanced around, then led him to a quieter corner of the room. The operation wasn't complete. My cover identity needed to remain intact, even under scrutiny. The individuals we were tracking had contacts throughout local government and law enforcement along the coast. If word got out that I'd received special treatment or identified myself as military, 11 months of work would have been compromised. So you just let us arrest you? Sometimes the best way to maintain cover is to commit fully to it, even when it's inconvenient, she said with a ghost of a smile. Besides, I knew the Admiral would intervene before things went too far. Another officer approached, signaling that she was needed elsewhere. It was good to see you, Detective, she said. Keep up the good work. As she walked away, Admiral Harrison appeared beside Vance. Impressive woman, isn't she? The Admiral said. Yes, sir. I've never met anyone like her. Few have. The Admiral paused. You know, Detective, we're always looking for people with your attention to detail and persistence. If you ever consider a change of career, call my office. 6 months later, Vance stood on the deck of a naval vessel, watching the coast of Maine disappear into the distance. After 13 years with the Coastal Harbor Police Department, he had accepted a position with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. His first assignment, liaison between local law enforcement and naval special operations along the eastern seaboard. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unlisted number. Some of us are always around. Welcome aboard. Vance smiled, recognizing Commander Evans's words from the shooting range. He knew he'd probably never see her again. People like her operate in shadows, Their successes never celebrated publicly, their sacrifices rarely acknowledged. But now he'd be part of the system that supports them, that makes their work possible. He'd help ensure that the next time someone like Commander Evans needs to maintain cover, there will be protocols in place to protect both the operation and the local authorities doing their jobs. The captain approached. Detective Vance, we're receiving reports of unusual activity at a private shooting range near our next port. Thought you might want to take point on this one. Vance nodded, understanding that his new role was beginning. Yes, sir. I'll look into it right away. As he reviewed the preliminary report, he noticed a detail that made him smile. A woman with an unremarkable appearance hitting targets at impossible distances. Some things never change. Months passed. Vance settled into his role with NCIS, developing protocols for identifying potential special operators in civilian encounters. His experience with Commander Evans became a training scenario for police departments along the coast. Then, one stormy evening, as he worked late in his office, a knock came at his door. Standing there, once again in civilian clothes with that deliberately unremarkable appearance, was Commander Evans. Detective, she acknowledged with a nod. It's Agent now, he corrected, gesturing for her to enter. I didn't expect to see you again. Plans change, she said, taking a seat. I understand you've implemented new protocols for identifying operators in the field based on our encounter. Yes, it's helping prevent similar situations. She studied him for a moment. Your work has been noticed, which is why I'm here. We need someone with your perspective for an upcoming operation. Vance leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of operation? The kind that requires someone who understands both sides, law enforcement and military. Someone who can navigate the gray areas when they overlap. Is this official? Very, she said, sliding a folder across his desk. Admiral Harrison recommended you personally. As Vance reviewed the documents, he began to understand the scope of what she was proposing. A joint task force targeting domestic threats with international connections, operating in the shadows between military jurisdiction and civilian law enforcement. Why me? He asked finally. Commander Evans studied him with those same calculating eyes he remembered from their first encounter. Because when you arrested me, you knew something wasn't right, but you followed procedure anyway. You put duty above instinct. That's exactly what we need. Vance considered the opportunity before him. 6 months ago, he was a small-town detective. Now he was being invited into a world few civilians ever see. When do we start? He asked. Commander Evans stood. We already have. Meet me tomorrow at 0600, same shooting range where we first met. And Vance, yes, this time leave the handcuffs at home. As she departed, Vance reflected on the strange path that led him here. From arresting a mysterious woman at a shooting range to joining her in defense of national security. Life certainly takes unexpected turns. He glanced down at the classified folder on his desk, emblazoned with the operation name, Silent Harbor 2. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one where the lines between law enforcement and military operations blur, where success means that nothing happens, and the greatest victories are the ones the public never hears about. Marcus arrived at the shooting range an hour before dawn, his usual routine for the past 15 years. He was surprised to find the lights already on inside the main building. Hello? He called, hand instinctively moving toward the small revolver he kept for emergencies. Just me, Marcus, came a familiar voice. Commander Evans sat at his desk, reviewing what appeared to be satellite images. Didn't expect to see you back so soon, he said, relaxing. It's been, 8 months? 9, she corrected, closing the folder. And this isn't exactly a social call. Marcus nodded, understanding. Agent Vance called yesterday, said I should prepare for some visitors. He's a quick study, she replied. We need your range for the next 72 hours. Exclusive use. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's a big ask during hunting season. I know. That's why this came with the request. She slid an envelope across the desk. Marcus glanced inside, saw a check with enough zeros to cover 6 months of operating costs. That'll do it, But you know I would have said yes anyway. We do things properly, she said, even when no one's watching, especially then. Over the next few hours, vehicles began arriving. Unmarked SUVs, a communications van disguised as a cable company truck, and a dozen men and women who, like Commander Evans, had perfected the art of being forgettable. By noon, the shooting range had transformed into a tactical operations center. Maps covered the walls, communications equipment filled Marcus's office, and the firing lanes had been converted to staging areas. Vance arrived last, bringing equipment from the NCIS field office. "Marcus," he greeted with a handshake. "Thanks for the accommodation." "Couldn't say no when my country calls," Marcus replied. "Besides, Commander Evans has a way of being persuasive without saying much at all." Vance smiled. "That she does." Commander Evans gathered everyone for a briefing. "For those who haven't been briefed, we've identified a potential security threat operating within 50 miles of this location. Intelligence suggests they're planning something significant within the next 48 hours. She gestured to the maps. "We have 3 possible locations for their operations center. We need to identify the correct one without alerting them to our presence." Vance studied the maps. "These are all civilian areas, 2 residential neighborhoods and a commercial district. We can't just raid them." "Exactly," Commander Evans confirmed. "Which is why we needed someone with your background, Vance. We need to maintain the firewall between military operations and domestic law enforcement." The operation unfolded methodically over the next day. Teams conducted surveillance, electronic intelligence gathering, and careful observation of the targets. Vance coordinated with local authorities, establishing cover stories and contingency plans without revealing the true nature of the operation. Marcus watched from the sidelines, impressed by the precision. These people moved differently from ordinary soldiers or police officers, more efficient, more controlled, communicating with minimal words and subtle gestures. Late that night, a breakthrough came. A team monitoring electronic communications picked up coded transmissions from one of the target locations, an abandoned waterfront warehouse that, on paper, belonged to a shell company. "We've got movement," reported one of the analysts. "Thermal imaging shows at least 8 individuals inside, plus what appears to be weapons cache." Commander Evans studied the feed. "Vance, this is where it gets complicated. We have probable cause, but this needs to transition to a law enforcement operation." Vance nodded. "I'll contact the tactical response team, but they'll need a briefing." "Give them the minimum," she instructed. "Foreign-trained operatives planning domestic attack. Nothing about our unit or mission parameters." As Vance coordinated with local authorities, Commander Evans pulled Marcus aside. "We need one more thing from you." "Name it," he said. "When this is over, certain details will need to be forgotten. The equipment here, some of the personnel you've met, the exact nature of the operation." Marcus smiled slightly. "Commander, I spent 20 years keeping secrets for the Navy. Some habits don't break." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's why we came here first. Vance said you were reliable." The raid happened just before dawn. Local tactical teams moved in with federal agents while Commander Evans and her team maintained overwatch positions, ready to intervene if the situation escalated beyond local capabilities. Didn't. The operation went smoothly. 8 arrests, a significant weapon seizure, and intelligence materials that would keep analysts busy for months. The official story released to the press mentioned only a successful joint operation between federal and local authorities based on anonymous intelligence. By noon, most of Commander Evans's team had disappeared, equipment packed into unmarked vehicles, leaving no trace of their presence. Marcus methodically returned the range to its normal configuration. Vance found him replacing target stands. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "According to the news, I had nothing to do with anything," Marcus replied. Vance smiled. "Exactly." As the last vehicles prepared to depart, Commander Evans approached Marcus one final time. "This range seems to be a nexus point for interesting activities. Just a place where people practice their skills," Marcus said. "Some more specialized than others." She handed him a business card with only a phone number. If you notice anyone else with unusual talents, this number reaches people who might be interested. Recruiting? Marcus asked. Always, she confirmed. The right people are hard to find. And even harder to recognize, he added. She nodded in acknowledgement. Take care, Marcus. As she walked away, Marcus called after her. Commander, was any of this real? The arrest? The courtroom? Or was it all part of the operation? She turned back. What do you think? Marcus considered this. I think sometimes the most effective way to hide is in plain sight. Create a spectacle that people remember, but for reasons that distract from the truth. For the first time, Commander Evans gave him a genuine smile. You would have made an excellent operative yourself, Marcus. I'm happy keeping the range running, he said. Someone needs to be here when people like you need a quiet place to practice. 6 months later, Marcus noticed a young woman at the range. Early 20s, handling her rifle with unusual expertise. Nothing flashy, but her technique spoke of professional training. When she adjusted for a difficult crosswind shot without checking any instruments, Marcus remembered Commander Evans doing the same thing. He watched for an hour as she systematically worked through different distances, recording her results in a small notebook. When she finished, he approached. That's some impressive shooting, he said. She nodded politely. Thank you, I practice when I can. Military background? He asked casually. College shooting team, she replied, a perfect cover story, plausible and difficult to verify. Marcus nodded, playing along. Well, you're welcome here anytime. We get all skill levels. As she packed her equipment, he noticed a familiar movement pattern, the same efficient motions he'd seen from Commander Evans and her team. That evening, after closing, Marcus stared at the business card Commander Evans gave him. The young woman had been good, very good, at maintaining her cover, but to his trained eye, certain things can't be hidden. He dialed the number. Identification, answered a neutral voice. Blue water, still horizon, Marcus said, recalling the authentication phrase Vance had taught him. Go ahead. I met someone interesting today, Marcus said. The kind of person you might want to know about. Details. Female, early 20s, expert marksmanship with unusual training indicators. Giving cover story about college teams but showing operational movement patterns. A pause. Assessment. Either she's one of yours testing me, or she's someone who should be on your radar. We'll look into it. Anything else? Marcus hesitated. Is Commander Evans still active in this area? Another pause, longer this time. That name isn't in our current operational database. Marcus understood. Of course. Just curious. Your contribution is noted and appreciated. 3 days later, the young woman returned to the range. This time, a man accompanied her, middle-aged, with the bearing of someone comfortable with authority. They practiced together, their interactions suggesting a mentor-student relationship. When they finished, the man approached Marcus while the woman packed their equipment. Mr. Thorne, he said, using Marcus's last name, though Marcus hadn't introduced himself. I understand you made a call recently. Marcus remained calm. I did. Good eyes, the man said. She's one of our assessment candidates. Part of her evaluation was to shoot here without drawing attention. She's skilled, Marcus acknowledged. But there are tells if you know what to look for. That's why we value observers like you, the man replied. Sometimes talent spots talent better than our formal systems. The young woman joined them. How did I do? She asked, dropping the pretense. Mr. Thorne identified you within an hour, the man told her. You'll need to work on concealing your training patterns. She accepted the criticism professionally. What gave me away? Wind adjustment without instruments, Marcus said. Commander Evans did the same thing. The man and woman exchanged a glance at the mention of Evans's name. Thank you for the feedback, she said. May I come back to practice? Marcus nodded. Anytime, though you might want to deliberately miss occasionally if you're trying to blend in. As they prepared to leave, the man handed Marcus an envelope. Our appreciation for your discretion and assistance. Inside was a new business card, this one with an embossed insignia Marcus recognized from Naval Special Warfare and a different phone number. "We're always looking for training facilities and observers," the man explained. "If you're interested in a more formal arrangement." Marcus considered it. After 15 years running the range, perhaps it was time for a new challenge. "I might be." "Commander Evans spoke highly of your situational awareness," the man added. "That carries weight in our organization." As Marcus watched them leave, he reflected on the strange path his retirement had taken. From running a simple shooting range to becoming part of an invisible network that identifies and nurtures the nation's most specialized defenders. He tucked the new card into his wallet next to the first one. Some people serve in uniform for all to see, others serve in shadows, and some, like him, simply keep watch, making sure those shadows remain safe places for necessary work. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the range to find a package waiting. A new high-end spotting scope with thermal capabilities and an encrypted communication module. The note attached contained only 3 words, "Keep watching, Marcus." He recognized the handwriting immediately. Commander Evans. She may have moved on to new operations, new identities, new missions, but her legacy continued here in this small corner of Maine, where ordinary-looking people with extraordinary skills could practice their craft away from curious eyes. Marcus installed the new equipment, understanding its true purpose. He wasn't just running a shooting range anymore. He was maintaining a waypoint in a hidden network, a place where those who operate in darkness can find momentary safety in the light. And if more young shooters with perfect technique and casual cover stories appeared, he'd know exactly what to do, because some of them are always around. You just don't see them unless you know how to look.